Most people think a mother's love is unconditional, but I learned at 14 that some mothers aren't parents. They are parasites who feed on the innocence of their own children until there is nothing left but bones. I watched her bury my baby's sister. I watched her neglect my brother until he ended up in a body bag. She thought she could just cry a few crocodile tears and move on to her next victim. She was wrong. I didn't just want to get even, I wanted to become the nightmare that wakes her up screaming for the rest of her miserable life. And when the moment finally came, God, it was worth every second.
If you looked at our family photos from the early 90s, you would have seen a lie. You would have seen a smiling young woman holding a baby, bathed in the soft golden hue of a seemingly perfect life. But photos don't capture temperature. They don't capture the chill in a room when a mother looks at her child and sees nothing but a burden. I was that burden. My name is irrelevant now. In this story, I am simply the survivor. But back then, I was the mistake. My mother was the kind of woman who loved the idea of children, but hated the reality of them. She loved the attention a pregnancy brought her, the baby showers, the compliments, the glowing aura of pending motherhood. But the moment the baby screamed, or pooped, or required her to sacrifice even an ounce of her comfort, that love evaporated like water on hot pavement. I was her first draft. And like most first drafts, she decided I wasn't good enough. When I was 2 years old, my brother Mark was born. I don't remember much from that age, obviously, but my grandparents filled in the blanks later. They told me I acted out, as toddlers do when their throne is usurped. I was jealous. I was loud. I was a child. To a normal parent, this is a developmental phase. To my mother, it was a declaration of war. He's a demonic hell spawn. He just stares at Mark. I don't want him near the baby. I don't want him near me. Instead of parenting me, she threw me away. It wasn't a formal adoption, just a slow, drifting abandonment. I spent my days at my grandparents' house. My grandfather, a man with hands rough like sandpaper but a heart made of gold, became my father figure. My grandmother, soft-spoken but enduring, became my mother. I learned to ride a bike with Grandpa holding the seat. I learned to read with Grandma pointing at the words. And when I went home to my mother's house, I felt like a visitor in a museum where I wasn't allowed to touch anything. I remember one specific afternoon when I was 7. I had drawn a picture at school, a crude crayon drawing of a house, a sun, and 4 stick figures, me, Mark, Mom, and Dad. I ran into the kitchen, breathless with the need for validation. Mom, look! She was feeding Mark, who was 5 then. She glanced at the paper in my hand, her eyes sliding over it like it was a piece of trash stuck to my shoe. Not now, she sighed, wiping oatmeal off Mark's chin. Can't you see I'm busy with your brother? Go show your grandmother. But I made it for you, I whispered. I said not now, she snapped, the sudden volume making me flinch. I walked to the trash can, slowly, waiting for her to stop me, waiting for her to say, no, honey, I want it. She never turned around. I dropped the drawing into the bin, and with it, the first piece of my love for her. Mark, however, was different. Despite my mother's attempts to pit us against each other, to make me the villain and him the prince, Mark loved me. He was the only thing in that house that looked at me with genuine eyes. Brother, he'd say, tugging on my shirt, play? And I would play, because even at 7, I knew Mark was innocent. He was just another prop in her play. He just didn't know it yet. If you looked at our family photos from the early 90s, you would have seen a lie. You would have seen a smiling young woman holding a baby, bathed in the soft golden hue of a seemingly perfect life. But photos don't capture temperature. They don't capture the chill in a room when a mother looks at her child and sees nothing but a burden. I was that burden. My name is irrelevant now. In this story, I am simply the survivor. But back then, I was the mistake. My mother was the kind of woman who loved the idea of children, but hated the reality of them. She loved the attention a pregnancy brought her, the baby showers, the compliments, the glowing aura of pending motherhood. But the moment the baby screamed, or pooped, or required her to sacrifice even an ounce of her comfort, that love evaporated like water on hot pavement. I was her first draft, and like most first drafts, she decided I wasn't good enough. When I was 2 years old, my brother Mark was born. I don't remember much from that age, obviously, but my grandparents filled in the blanks later. They told me I acted out, as toddlers do when their throne is usurped. I was jealous, I was loud, I was a child. To a normal parent, this is a developmental phase. To my mother, it was a declaration of war. He's a demonic hellspawn, she told my grandmother over the phone, unaware that years later I would hear the recording. He just stares at Mark. I don't want him near the baby. I don't want him near me. Instead of parenting me, she threw me away. It wasn't a formal adoption, just a slow, drifting abandonment. I spent my days at my grandparents' house. My grandfather, a man with hands rough like sandpaper but a heart made of gold, became my father figure. My grandmother, soft-spoken but enduring, became my mother. I learned to ride a bike with Grandpa holding the seat. I learned to read with Grandma pointing at the words. And when I went home to my mother's house, I felt like a visitor in a museum where I wasn't allowed to touch anything. I remember one specific afternoon when I was 7. I had drawn a picture at school, a crude crayon drawing of a house, a sun, and 4 stick figures. Me, Mark, Mom, and Dad. I ran into the kitchen, breathless with the need for validation. "Mom, look!" She glanced at the paper in my hand, her eyes sliding over it like it was a piece of trash stuck to my shoe. "Not now," she sighed, wiping oatmeal off Mark's chin. "Can't you see I'm busy with your brother? Go show your grandmother." "But I made it for you," I whispered. "I said not now," she snapped, the sudden volume making me flinch. I walked to the trash can slowly, waiting for her to stop me, waiting for her to say, "No, honey, I want it." She never turned around. I dropped the drawing into the bin, and with it, the first piece of my love for her. Mark, however, was different. Despite my mother's attempts to pit us against each other, to make me the villain and him the prince, Mark loved me. He was the only thing in that house that looked at me with genuine eyes. "Brother," he'd say, tugging on my shirt, "play?" And I would play, because even at 7, I knew Mark was innocent. He was just another prop in her play. He just didn't know it yet.
Time is a cruel editor. It cuts out the boring parts and leaves you with the trauma. Let's skip ahead. The timeline fractures. My biological father, a man who tried his best but was ultimately pushed out by my mother's chaos, divorced her. It was messy, loud, and ended with us staying with Mom. Enter the stepdad. Let's call him the warden. He was the man who believed that children were like dogs. They needed to be broken before they could be useful. He married my mother, and suddenly the house wasn't just cold, it was dangerous. By this time, the family had expanded again. I was 13, Mark was 11, and then came the second batch. Alicia, a beautiful bubbling toddler of 1.5, and Sam, a newborn. The house was chaotic. 4 kids, 2 narcissists, 0 love. I was at that age, 13, where authority is meant to be questioned. I had opinions, I had a voice, and the warden hated it. "You got a smart mouth, boy," he'd say, his voice low, a rumble of thunder before the storm. "I'm just saying it doesn't make sense to mow the lawn when it's raining," I argued once. That was the first time he hit me. It wasn't a slap, it was a closed fist to the stomach. I doubled over, gasping for air, the wet grass soaking into my knees. "You do it because I said so," he spat. I looked up, wheezing, scanning the patio door. My mother was there. She was watching through the glass, sipping her coffee. Our eyes met. "Help me," I pleaded silently. "Mom, please." She took a sip of her coffee and turned away. That was the moment the seed was planted. It wasn't revenge yet. I was too young, too scared, too broken to understand the concept of vengeance. But it was the death of hope. I realized then that I had no protector. I was alone in the trenches. The abuse became a routine. If I got a B on a report card, a beating. If I didn't clean the gutters, a task that required me, an 11-year-old, to climb a 20-foot ladder while he watched from the ground drinking beer, a beating. One afternoon, I was reading in the living room. I loved books. They were the only escape I had. I was lost in the fantasy world where heroes saved the day. The warden walked in, tripped over my school bag, which I had left by the door, and exploded. "Pick it up," he screamed. "I'm sorry, He grabbed the bookshelf next to me, a heavy oak veneer monstrosity loaded with encyclopedias. He didn't just tip it, he shoved it. The world went dark and heavy. I remember the crushing weight, the sharp corners digging into my shoulder, the smell of old paper and dust. I laid there, pinned, hearing him laugh. "Maybe that'll teach you to be organized." He left me there. It took Mark and me 10 minutes to leverage the shelf off my body. I limped for a week. My mother told me to stop being dramatic and that I was clumsy. Mom's mistake, number 1. She taught me that pain was a currency, and she was racking up a debt she couldn't pay. The summer I turned 14, the air was thick with humidity and impending doom. You know that feeling when the barometer drops and the sky turns green before a tornado? That was the atmosphere in our house every single day. It was a Saturday, the kind of Saturday that should be filled with cartoons and cereal. "Watch your sister," my mother commanded. She was wearing her sleep mask, pushing it up onto her forehead. She looked exhausted, mostly because she had been up all night with baby Sam. "Your stepfather and I need a break." "Okay," I said. "Where are you going?" "Bedroom. Do not disturb us unless the house is on fire." Mark and I were left in the living room with Alicia. She was 2 now, a chaotic, stumbling, giggling force of nature. She had these big, wide eyes that seemed to take in the whole world at once. The warden was in the den playing video games. We were strictly forbidden from touching his console, but we were allowed to watch him play if we were good. It was his way of dangling a carrot he never intended to give us. Mark sat on the floor, mesmerized by the flashing lights of the TV. I sat on the sofa, keeping one eye on the screen and one eye on Alicia, who was playing with building blocks near the sliding glass door. I must have zoned out. Maybe for a minute, maybe two. I was 14, tired from chores and hypnotized by the game. I blinked and looked down at the blocks. They were there. Alicia wasn't. A cold spike of adrenaline, sharper than any needle, pierced my chest. Mark, where's Alicia? Mark looked around, his face mirroring my sudden panic. She was just here. We stood up. Alicia? I called out. Silence. I checked the kitchen. Empty. I checked the bathroom. Empty. Panic began to rise in my throat like bile. I ran to the den. Dad, is Alicia in here? The warden didn't even look away from the screen. No, get out. We can't find her, I screamed, my voice cracking. That got his attention. He paused the game. What do you mean you can't find her? You were watching her. She was just there. The three of us exploded into action. The noise woke my mother. She stumbled out of the bedroom, clutching Sam. Why are you yelling? Alicia's gone, I screamed. My dad, biological father, who happened to be visiting that weekend to drop off child support, was in the kitchen making a sandwich. Hearing the screams, he dropped the knife. In the chaos, he put his hand down on the electric stove burner he had just turned on. He screamed, clutching his burnt hand, but the pain didn't stop him. Check the front yard, my dad yelled. Mark and I bolted out the front door. We scanned the street. Cars passed by, oblivious to the nightmare unfolding on the lawn. Nothing. The back, Mark yelled. We ran around the side of the house. The backyard was fenced in, a large wooden deck leading down to a patch of grass, and the pool. The above-ground pool. We hadn't swum in it yet that year. The cover was half off because the warden had been meaning to clean it for weeks. The water was green, murky, filled with leaves. We ran to the edge. I looked into the murky water. I couldn't see the bottom. She's not here, Mark said, his voice trembling. She can't be. We ran back inside. We checked the garage. We tore through closets. Then a scream. It wasn't a human sound. It was the sound of an animal having its soul ripped out. It came from outside. Mark and I froze. We turned and ran back to the deck. My mother was on her knees by the pool. The warden was pulling something small and wet out of the green water. Alicia. She looked like a doll, a wet, heavy doll. Her skin was already turning a color that human skin should never be. She's not breathing. She's not breathing, my mother shrieked. The warden laid her on the wooden deck. He started pressing on her tiny chest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathe, damn it, he yelled. My biological father grabbed Mark and I. He spun us around, burying our faces into his shirt. Don't look, boys, don't look. But I had already seen. I saw her purple lips. I saw her eyes half open, staring at nothing. I heard the sirens in the distance, getting louder, but they sounded miles away. All I could hear was the wet slap of the warden's hands on my sister's chest and my mother's guttural wailing. Mom's mistake number 2, negligence. They got her heart started in the ambulance. For a few hours we had hope. We sat in the waiting room, huddled together, praying to a God I wasn't sure I believed in anymore. But the brain can only go without oxygen for so long. That night, the doctor came out. He didn't have to speak. The look on his face said it all. She was brain dead. They pulled the plug at 11:42 p.m. I watched the flatline. I watched my little sister, the one who loved to smash blocks and giggle at the cat, turn into a memory. And in the car ride home, amidst the sobbing, I looked at my mother. She was crying, yes. She was devastated, yes. But deep down, a dark, intrusive thought whispered to me, you were supposed to be watching her. You told us to watch her so you could sleep. The guilt hit me like a freight train. I looked at Mark. He was staring out the window, tears silent on his cheeks. He was 11. He was blaming himself. It's not your fault, I whispered to him, grabbing his hand. He squeezed back, his grip bone-crushing. We were right there, he choked out. It's not your fault, I repeated, but I didn't believe it myself. The grief didn't bring us together. It tore us apart. Child Protective Services, CPS, arrived a week later. They swarmed the house like vultures. They interviewed us. They looked at the pool. They looked at the bruises on my arms from where the warden had grabbed me too hard the week before. My biological father, fueled by grief and rage, launched a custody battle. She killed her, he shouted in the lawyer's office. She neglected them. I want my sons. We stayed with my grandparents during the trial. For a brief moment, we felt safe. We thought, this is it. We're going to be saved. But my mother, she was a master manipulator. In court, she played the grieving, broken mother perfectly. She wore black. She wept softly into a handkerchief. She painted my father as an aggressor, trying to steal her children in her moment of greatest pain. And the judge, he bought it. The goal of this court is reunification, the judge said, banging his gavel. The children belong with their mother. My heart stopped. I looked at my grandfather. He looked defeated. We were sent back to the house where Alicia died, back to the warden. But things had changed. The warden, terrified of another CPS visit, stopped the physical beatings. Instead, he switched to psychological warfare. You killed her, he would whisper when my mother wasn't in the room. If you had been watching her, she'd be alive. He said it so often, I started to believe it. Mark took it the hardest. He became withdrawn. The light in his eyes dimmed. He stopped playing. He stopped laughing. And my mother, she was too busy popping pills to notice. This was the beginning of the spiral. The doctor had prescribed her painkillers for her nerves and back pain from the stress. Oxy, Vicodin, Xanax. She was numb. She checked out. Sam, the baby, was crying constantly. Mark and I raised him. We changed his diapers. We fed him bottles. We were 14 and 12, raising a baby because our mother was floating on a cloud of opioids. I tried to tell my grandparents. She's always asleep, I said. She acts weird. She's grieving, honey. Give her time. Time. That's all we gave her, and she used that time to kill again. Chapter 5. The Downward Spiral. Fast forward, I am 18. I had survived. That's how I viewed high school, not as an education, but as a survival exercise. I kept my head down. I worked part-time jobs and hid the money. I was planning my escape. Mark was 15 now. Mark, he wasn't doing well. The trauma of Alicia's death had festered inside him. He had started hanging out with the wrong crowd. He was looking for an escape, just like Mom was. He got into a fight at school, broke his finger, a nasty break that required surgery, pins, screws, the works. The doctors prescribed him heavy-duty painkillers. You need to monitor these, the doctor told my mother, handing her the bottle. 1 every 4 hours, no more. These are highly addictive. I know, she said, snatching the bottle. I'm his mother. A wolf guarding the sheep. I was finishing up my senior year. I was busy applying to colleges, dreaming of dorm rooms and meal plans, anything to get away from the toxicity of that house. One Tuesday, my grandfather picked me up from school. It was odd. Usually I took the bus. As I walked to his truck, I saw his face. It was gray, ashen. Grandpa, what's wrong? He didn't speak. He just unlocked the door. We drove in silence, a heavy, suffocating silence. When we turned onto my street, I saw the flashing lights, red and blue, rotating, reflecting off the windows of the neighbors' houses. An ambulance. A police car. No, I whispered. Not again. My grandfather parked the truck. I didn't wait for him. I left out and sprinted toward the house. The front door was open. I saw paramedics wheeling a stretcher out. But they weren't rushing. They weren't running. They were walking, slowly. There was no oxygen mask. There was no IV drip. There was a black bag zipped over the form on the gurney. I stopped dead in my tracks. My knees hit the pavement before my brain registered the fall. Mark! I screamed. My mother was standing on the porch. She wasn't crying. She looked dazed, confused, high. A police officer was talking to her.
Ma'am, we found the empty bottle in his room. The prescription was filled yesterday. Where were you? I I was napping, she slurred. He said his hand hurt. I scrambled to my feet and charged at her. I wanted to kill her. I wanted to wrap my hands around her throat and squeeze until her eyes popped out. You killed him! I roared, lunging up the steps. My grandfather caught me around the waist, hauling me back. I thrashed, screaming obscenities, screaming pure raw hatred at the woman who birthed me. You let him die! You junkie! You murderer! She just stared at me, blinking slowly like a lizard in the sun. She didn't shed a tear. Mark was 15. He had overdosed on his own painkillers because my mother, the guardian, had either given him the bottle to shut him up or was too stoned to notice he had taken it. Later, the autopsy confirmed it, a lethal amount. That was the day the son died, and the Avenger was born. As they loaded my brother's body into the back of the ambulance, I stopped screaming. A coldness settled in my chest, a glacier moving into my heart, freezing my heart solid. I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't my mother. She was a disease, a cancer that had consumed Alicia and now Mark. And I was the surgeon who was going to cut her out. The funeral of a ghost. They say you never get used to funerals, but by the time I was 18, I was an expert. I knew the smell of lilies was just a mask for the scent of formaldehyde. I knew that the sorry for your loss whispers were mostly performative, and I knew that the person crying the loudest in the front row was usually the most guilty. My mother wailed. She threw herself over Mark's casket like a tragic heroine in a Victorian play. She wore a black veil, trembling, clutching a rosary she had never used a day in her life. To the outside world, she was a mother broken by unimaginable tragedy. Losing 2 children? It was unspeakable. The community rallied around her. Neighbors brought casseroles. The church held vigils. But I sat 3 rows back, dry-eyed, staring at the back of her head. I wasn't watching a grieving mother. I was watching a murderer at the scene of the crime, basking in the attention. My father sat beside me, his hand gripping my knee so hard his knuckles were white. He was shaking. Not from sadness, but from a rage that mirrored my own. After the service, the divide happened. It was immediate and violent. We stood in the church parking lot. The gray sky spat a fine, miserable mist over the asphalt. You are not taking him, my mother hissed, her mascara running down her cheeks in black rivulets. She was talking about me. You killed my son, my father said, his voice terrifyingly calm. You let him die on your watch. You think I'm letting you keep the one I have left? I didn't kill him. It was an accident. He stole the pills, she shrieked, looking for sympathy from the lingering Warners. He was 15, Janet. You were the adult. You were high. My father stepped forward, and for a second I thought he was going to hit her. My grandfather stepped in between them. Stop it, Grandpa said, his voice breaking. Not here, not today. But the damage was done. Then came the second blow. A black sedan pulled up. 2 women in business suits stepped out, social workers. They weren't there for me. I was 18 legally. They were there for Sam. Sam was just a toddler, my half-brother, the last innocent thing left in our cursed bloodline. Mrs. Last Name, one of the women said, we have an emergency removal order for Samuel. My mother screamed. It was the same scream she let out when Alicia died, but this time, nobody moved to help her. No, you can't take my baby. He's all I have left. I watched as they put Sam into the car seat in the back of the sedan. He was crying, reaching out for, well, not for her. He was reaching out for me. Baba, Baba, he cried. My heart shattered into a million unrecognizable pieces. I took a step forward, instinct telling me to save him, but my father held me back. Let him go, son, my dad whispered, tears streaming down his face. He's safer with strangers than he is with her. Let him go. I watched the car drive away. That was the last time I ever saw my brother Sam. My mother's negligence had killed 2 of her children and exiled the 3rd into the foster system. She was now childless. I turned to her. She was on her knees in the wet gravel, sobbing into my grandmother's skirt. I walked over. My shadow fell over her. She looked up, expecting comfort, expecting her eldest son to hug her. I hate you, I said. It wasn't a scream. It was a statement of fact, like saying the sky is blue. I am going with Dad. You are dead to me. I got in my father's truck and didn't look back. Chapter 7. The Enemy Lines. The next few months were a blur of legal battles and silence. My father won full custody of me, not that it mattered much since I was an adult, but the victory was symbolic. My mother was stripped of her parental rights regarding Sam. She was branded unfit. But she wasn't in prison, not yet. The local prosecutor decided there wasn't enough evidence to charge her with manslaughter for Mark's death. Negligence is hard to prove beyond a redoubtable doubt in these cases, they told us. She claims he stole the meds. It's her word against the dead boys. She got away with it. Again. I lived with my father, but my heart was still tethered to that house of horrors. Why? Because of my grandparents. They were the collateral damage. They loved her. It was a blind, toxic, enabling love. They couldn't accept that their daughter was a monster, so they created a narrative where she was a victim of bad luck.
They took her in. They let her live in their spare room. They fed her, clothed her, and comforted her. I visited them often. My father hated it, but he understood. They were my grandparents. They had raised me when she threw me away. I couldn't abandon them. But every time I walked into their house, I saw her. She would be sitting on the couch watching TV, looking pathetic. She'd try to talk to me. "Hi, honey, how's school?" I would look through her as if she were made of glass. I would speak only to my grandfather. "Grandpa, can we check the oil in the truck?" "Sure, kiddo." She would sigh loudly, playing the martyr. I guess I don't exist then. No, I thought. You exist, unfortunately. I began to study her. I wasn't just ignoring her. I was observing her. I watched her patterns. I watched how she manipulated my grandmother into giving her money. I watched how she guilt-tripped my grandfather into doing her laundry. "My back hurts so bad, Daddy, I can't lift the basket." "I got it, sweetheart," he'd say. He was too kind. It made me sick, but it also gave me an opening. I realized then that my revenge couldn't be a physical attack. If I hit her, I'd go to jail, and she'd be the victim again. No, I had to be smarter. I had to be the ghost in the machine. I had to make her life a living hell, and I had to make her believe she was doing it to herself. It took a year for the stars to align. I was 19, working a construction job and saving every penny. I had grown colder, harder. The boy who cried over a drawing was gone. In his place was a man who kept a mental ledger of every sin committed against him. The first domino fell with the warden, my stepfather. He had been spiraling since the divorce from my mom, which happened shortly after Mark's death. He was caught doctor shopping, going to multiple doctors to get multiple prescriptions for painkillers. He was arrested, charged with fraud and possession, and thrown in prison. When the news broke, I laughed. I sat in my room and laughed until my ribs hurt. One monster down, one to go. My mother, however, saw an opportunity. She used his arrest to play the victim card even harder with my grandparents. See, he was the bad influence. He got me hooked on these pills. It wasn't my fault. My grandmother ate it up. My grandfather was skeptical but silent. Then fate handed me a weapon. My mother slipped at work. She had a part-time job as a cashier, which she complained about daily. It was a wet floor. She went down hard. The diagnosis? 3 herniated discs, severe spinal damage. She was in agony, real physical agony. For the first time, her pain wasn't psychosomatic or a ploy for attention. She could barely walk. She needed surgery, but she refused, opting instead for, you guessed it, pain management. Pills, powerful opiates, Percocet, Oxycontin, muscle relaxers. She moved permanently into my grandparents' house. My grandfather, bless his heart, set her up on the couch because she couldn't climb the stairs. I went over to visit one afternoon. She was lying on the couch, surrounded by orange pill bottles like a dragon guarding its hoard. "Oh, look who it is," she sneered, her voice thick with drugs. "The prodigal son." "Grandma asked me to fix the sink," I said, walking past her. "My back is killing me. Be a good boy and get me my water." I stopped. I looked at the water glass on the table. It was 3 feet away from her. "Get it yourself." "I can't move." "Then thirst," I said, and walked into the kitchen. That night, lying in bed, a plan formed. It was simple. It was petty. But it was vicious. She was dependent on those pills. She needed them to function. She needed them to escape the reality of her miserable life. What if they started disappearing? The first revenge, gaslighting. I started visiting my grandparents more often. "I want to spend time with you guys," I told them. They were delighted. My mother was annoyed, but she couldn't kick me out of a house she didn't own. My strategy was subtle. She kept her pills on the coffee table next to the couch. Every time I walked by when she was dozing off or in the bathroom, I would act. Phase 1, displacement. I wouldn't steal them, not yet. I would just move the bottle. I'd take the bottle from the coffee table and put it on the TV stand across the room, or on the kitchen counter, or under the couch cushion. She would wake up and reach for her relief. Her hand would grasp empty air. "Where are my pills?" she'd panic. "Mom, Dad, did you move my meds?" "No, dear, we didn't touch them," Grandma would say. "I left them right here." She would start tearing the cushions apart, wincing in pain. "Someone stole them." "Maybe you left them in the kitchen when you got water," I'd suggest innocently from the recliner, reading a magazine. She'd limp to the kitchen. "Oh, here they are." She looked confused. "I could have sworn." I did this for weeks, every single day. I watched her question her own memory. I watched the frustration build. I watched the fear in her eyes, the fear that her mind was slipping just like her life. Phase 2, reduction. Once she was sufficiently paranoid, I escalated. I started taking pills, not to use. I flushed them down the toilet immediately. I hated the things, but I wanted her to run out. If the bottle said take every 4 hours, she would do the math. She knew exactly how many she should have. I'd take 2 out, just 2. 3 days later, "I'm out. How am I out? I should have enough for 2 more days." She would scream at the doctor's office on the phone. "You shorted me. The pharmacist stole them." She was labeled a difficult patient.
The doctor started flagging her file. They suspected she was abusing them. They didn't know I was the ghost in the machine flushing her supply. I am in agony, she screamed one night, throwing the empty bottle at the wall. Why does this keep happening? I sat in the corner, eating an apple. Crunch. Maybe you're taking more than you think, Mom, I said. Addicts usually lose track. I am not an addict, she shrieked. Get out of my sight. I smiled, a cold, tight smile. It's Grandma's house. I'll leave when I'm ready. Phase 3, the climax. The culmination of this phase came 3 months later. I had hidden her entire refill. I took the fresh bottle she had just brought home from the pharmacy and taped it to the underside of the dining room table. She went nuclear. She tore the living room apart. She was sweating, shaking, withdrawals were kicking in. I can't find them. I can't take this pain. She made a decision. A stupid, desperate decision. She found an old stash, some expired muscle relaxers, and a half bottle of vodka my grandfather kept in the cabinet. She downed a handful of the pills and chased it with the vodka to numb the back pain. Then she decided she needed to go to the emergency room to demand more pain meds. I'm driving to the hospital, she slurred, grabbing the keys to my grandmother's car. You shouldn't drive, my grandmother pleaded. Janet, you're not well. I'm fine, she yelled, stumbling out the door. I watched from the window. I could have stopped her. I could have taken the keys. I was stronger than her. I was sober, but I didn't. I watched her back out of the driveway, clipping the mailbox as she went. As soon as her taillights disappeared around the corner, I picked up the phone. 911, what is your emergency? Yes, I'd like to report a drunk driver, a silver Toyota Camry. She's swerving all over the road near Elm Street. I think she's on pills. It looks really dangerous. I hung up. I sat back down on the couch and waited. 20 minutes later, the phone rang. My grandmother answered it. Her face went pale. Oh my God, is she okay? Yes, we understand. She hung up, tears in her eyes. Your mother, she crashed the car into a parked van. The police are there. They say she's intoxicated. They're arresting her. Inside, my heart did a somersault. Is she hurt? I asked, feigning concern. Just minor cuts, but she's going to jail, honey. DUI and possession of a controlled substance without the bottle. I stood up and walked over to my grandmother, hugging her. I'm so sorry, Grandma. Over her shoulder, I looked at the empty spot on the couch where my mother usually lay. One strike, I thought, but I'm not done. She spent 6 months in county jail. 6 months where the house was quiet. 6 months where I didn't have to see her face. I visited her once, just once. I sat behind the glass partition. She looked terrible. No makeup, hair grain, wearing an orange jumpsuit that washed out her pale skin. She looked exactly like what she was, a convict. You look healthy, I said into the phone receiver. Get me out of here, she hissed. Talk to your grandfather. Tell him to bail me out. Grandpa is tired, Mom. He spent his retirement money on your lawyers for the custody battle. He has nothing left. I know you called them, she whispered, her eyes narrowing. I know it was you. I leaned forward, my breath fogging the glass. You can't prove anything, but even if I did, consider it a chore. I'm just cleaning up the trash, just like you taught me. I hung up the phone and walked out. She was in a cage, but 6 months wasn't enough. She had taken 2 lives. 6 months was an insult. I needed to destroy her future. I needed to make sure that when she got out, she had no place to go, no hope, and no escape. I needed to prepare for her homecoming. 6 months. That's how long I had to prepare. While my mother was sitting in a county cell wearing orange, I was busy redesigning her hell. I was officially a college student now. I had taken a gap year, a sanity year, to work and save money. My grandparents, feeling guilty about the chaos of my childhood, offered me a deal. As long as you are working and in school, you can live here rent-free. It was the golden ticket. But I didn't just want a room, I wanted her room. My mother had occupied the downstairs master bedroom for years. It was the only room with an attached bathroom, crucial for her bad back. It was spacious, cool, and comfortable. The week before her release, I approached my grandfather. Grandpa, I said, putting on my best responsible grandson face, I'm studying late nights now. Engineering is tough. My room upstairs is too small for my drafting table, and it's hot in the summer. Mom isn't going to be paying rent when she gets back. Maybe I should take the downstairs room. He hesitated. She needs the bathroom, son. Her back. I countered. The walk to the hall bathroom is 10 feet. Plus, she's going to be on probation. She needs to prove she's humble, right? Sleeping in the master bedroom doesn't look like humility. He sighed. He was tired. He just wanted peace. Fine, but you tell her. Gladly. The next day, I rented a storage unit on the other side of town. The cheapest, darkest, dampest unit I could find. I packed her life into boxes. Her clothes, her trinkets, her pictures of herself. I shoved them all into cardboard coffins. I didn't handle them with care. If a picture frame cracked, it cracked. If a blouse got wrinkled, too bad. I moved everything to the storage unit. Then I moved my stuff in. I set up my gaming PC. I bought a new firm mattress. I painted the walls a dark, calming blue. I turned her sanctuary into my fortress. When the day of her release came, my grandfather picked her up. I was waiting in the living room, sitting in the recliner, reading a textbook. She walked in. She looked thinner, harder. Jail had stripped away the softness, leaving only the bitter core. "I'm home," she announced, expecting a parade. "Welcome back," I said, without looking up. She beelined for the master bedroom door. She reached for the handle. "That's locked." She froze. "What?" "That's my room now," I said, turning a page. "Grandpa said I could have it for my studies." She whipped around, her eyes bulging. "Dad, is he serious?" My grandfather rubbed the back of his neck, looking at the floor. "He's in college, Janet. He needs the space. And, well, you haven't contributed to the bills in years." "Where am I supposed to sleep?" she shrieked. I pointed to the living room, to the old beige sleeper sofa that had been there since 1998. "The couch is free," I said. Her face went pale. She had herniated discs. She had chronic back pain. And that couch was a torture device. It had a metal support bar that ran right across the middle, exactly where a sleeper's lower back would rest. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "My back." "Beggars can't be choosers," I said, finally looking her in the eye. "You should be grateful you have a roof at all." The second revenge wasn't an event. It was a daily grind. It was slow, agonizing, and incredibly satisfying. Every night I would hear the ritual. She would pull the sofa bed out. The springs would screech, a symphony of rust and neglect. She would lay down a thin sheet. She would try to arrange pillows to pad the metal bar, but it never worked. Physics was on my side. I would leave my bedroom door slightly ajar, just so I could hear. Creak, groan. She would whimper in the dark. "God! Ow!" She would toss and turn, trying to find a position that didn't feel like being stabbed in the spine. But the bar was relentless. It pressed into her herniated discs all night. In the morning, the show continued. I would wake up early, refreshed from sleeping on my memory foam mattress. I'd walk into the kitchen to make coffee. She would be trying to stand up. It was a production. She had to roll off the couch onto the floor, then crawled to a chair to hoist herself up. She looked like a broken marionette. "Good morning," I'd chirp, pouring coffee. "Sleep well?" She would glare at me with eyes rimmed in red, dark circles hanging like bruises. I didn't sleep a wink. "That bar, it's crippling me." "And maybe you should stretch more," I suggested, taking a sip. "Or get a job and move out." "I can't work. I'm disabled," she yelled. "You were well enough to drive drunk," I reminded her. She would growl and limp to the bathroom. This went on for 2 years. 2 years of her sleeping on a metal bar, 2 years of her waking up in agony, 2 years of me watching her suffer in the very house she had terrorized. I also kept messing with her meds. She was back on them, of course. She found new doctors. She manipulated my grandmother to pay for them. I continued my ghost routine. I'd hide 1 pill here, 2 pills there. I had unscrewed the caps just slightly so they'd spill when she picked them up. I wanted her life to be a constant series of small, frustrating failures. I wanted her to feel like the universe hated her. She didn't know the universe had a name, and it was her son. Then the dynamic shifted. My grandfather, the only man I truly respected despite his enabling, got sick. It was cancer, fast and aggressive. He was the glue holding the household together. He was the only one who could tell my mother no, even if he rarely did. I watched him wither away. I spent my days going to class and my nights sitting by his bedside. My mother, she made it about her. "I can't believe he's leaving me," she'd cry, sitting at the foot of his bed. "What am I going to do?" "It's not about you, Mom," I'd hiss. When he passed, the house fell into a dark, suffocating silence. At the funeral, I didn't cry. I had run out of tears years ago. I just felt a deep, hollow dread, because without him, my grandmother was vulnerable. My grandmother was a sweet woman, but she was weak. She had no backbone. She lived to serve others, and with Grandpa gone, my mother sank her claws in deep. Within a month of the funeral, the atmosphere in the house changed from tense to criminal. My mother's addiction spiraled. The doctors were cutting her off again. The doctor shopping laws had become stricter. She couldn't get her fix legally anymore. So she turned to the streets. But she had no money. "Mom," I heard her say to my grandmother in the kitchen one night, "I need medicine. The pain is unbearable. It's what Dad would have wanted. You don't want me to suffer, do you?" "No, honey, of course not," Grandma said, her voice shaking. "But I don't have that kind of cash. The pension is small." "We can make it work," my mother whispered. "I know people. We can move things."
I froze in the hallway. Move things? My mother, the 50-year-old disabled woman, and my 75-year-old grieving grandmother dealing drugs? It sounded insane. It sounded like a bad movie plot, but desperation makes people do insane things. I started watching them like a hawk. My mother had connected with a local dealer, some scum she probably met through her old connections or even during her jail stint. The arrangement was bafflingly stupid. The dealer would drop off a package, usually pills, sometimes powders, at the house. My grandmother, the sweet old lady who baked cookies for the church, would hold the money. People would come to the door. "Is Janet here?" a shady guy in a hoodie would ask. "She's in the back," Grandma would say, letting him in. They used my grandmother's clean record and innocent appearance as a shield. Who would suspect a grieving widow? I consented them. "Are you insane?" I yelled one evening after finding a baggie of OxyContin on the kitchen counter next to the sugar bowl. "Lower your voice," my mother hissed. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what this is. Grandma, look at me. If the cops come, you lose everything. The house, your pension, your freedom. You will die in prison." My grandmother looked terrified. She wrung her hands. "Janet says it's just for a little while, just until she gets on her feet. She needs her medicine," my name. "She's in pain." "She is playing you," I screamed. "She is using you." "You don't understand pain," my mother shouted, stepping between us. "You are heartless, cruel boy. You want me to suffer." "Yes," I yelled back, "I do, but I don't want Grandma to go to jail for it." I stormed out. This was the third revenge, or rather, the failed attempt at it. I couldn't let this happen. I had to nuke it. I went to a payphone. Yes, they still existed in back corners of gas stations, miles away. I didn't use my cell. "I want to report drug distribution," I said, my voice disguised. "124 Oak Street. They're dealing pills. Ask for Janet." I waited. I expected a raid. I expected doors to be kicked in. I was ready to sit on the porch and watch the police drag her away forever. But nothing happened. A patrol car drove by slowly a few days later. They paused. They looked at the house, a nice suburban home with a manicured lawn and a sweet old lady watering the petunias. They drove on. My mother was too small time. The police had bigger fish to fry than a couple of old ladies swapping pills for cash. Or maybe my tip wasn't specific enough. I was furious. My revenge had failed. She was winning. She was dragging my grandmother down to hell with her, and I was powerless to stop it without implicating myself or destroying my grandmother completely. I realized then that legal revenge wasn't going to work anymore. The law was too slow, too blind. I had to play the long game, the very long game. I decided to bide my time. I focused on finishing college. I focused on saving money. I focused on building an escape pod. "Fine," I told them a week later. "Do what you want, but I have nothing to do with it. Keep your stash out of my room." My mother smirked. She thought she had won. She thought she had broken me. "That's a good boy," she said. I looked at her, and in my mind, I started writing the eulogy for our relationship. "Laugh now, mother," I thought, "because when I leave, I'm taking the pillars of this temple with me, and the roof is going to collapse on your head." Years passed. The timeline blurs here because misery is repetitive. I graduated college. I got a job, a good one, in engineering. I started making real money. But I didn't move out. Not yet. I stayed in the house. I paid a small amount of rent to my grandmother to help with bills and to ensure the house didn't get foreclosed on because my mother was snorting the mortgage payments. I met a girl. Let's call her Sarah. She was everything my family wasn't. Kind, stable, normal. I told her everything, the deaths, the abuse, the drugs. "Why do you stay?" she asked me one night, tracing the scars on my soul. I said, "I'm waiting for the checkmate. I can't leave Grandma yet, and I need to make sure she has nothing left when I go." The end began when my grandmother's health finally gave out. The stress of the drug dealing, the grief of losing her husband, and the constant manipulation by my mother took its toll. She had a stroke. It wasn't fatal, but it was debilitating. She couldn't walk well. Her mind was foggy. She needed full-time care. This was it, the end game. My mother, of course, couldn't provide care. She could barely take care of a goldfish. "I can't lift her," my mother complained. "My back." So the burden fell on me. I hired nurses with my own money. I managed the household. I was the captain of the sinking ship.
And then the inheritance conversation happened. My grandmother, in a moment of clarity, sat me down. "I'm tired, my name," she whispered. "I want to go to the home, the one where your grandfather's sister was. It's nice there." "I know, Grandma. I can make that happen." "But the money," she worried. "Your mother spent so much." "I have money. I'll pay for it." Her eyes filled with tears. "You're a good boy, better than we deserved." "And the house?" I asked. "The bank owns most of it now," she admitted. "We refinanced to pay for things." My mother had drained the equity. The house was a hollow shell. I smiled. It was perfect. If the bank took the house and Grandma went to a nursing home, where would Mother go? She had no job, no money, no friends. She had burned all those bridges. No husband, no other children. She had only me. And she actually believed, truly, deeply believed, that I would take care of her. Because that's what sons do, right? Even sons you abused. Even sons whose siblings you killed. She relied on the blood is thicker than water myth. She didn't know that I had replaced my blood with ice water a long time ago. I spent the next month finalizing the arrangements. I found a beautiful assisted living facility for Grandma in a different state, close to where I had secretly accepted a new job. I signed the lease on a new apartment for myself and Sarah. I packed my things quietly. And then I waited for the question. I knew it was coming. My mother sensed the change. She saw the boxes. She saw the nurses preparing Grandma for transport. We were sitting in the living room. The TV was on low. The same room where I watched her ignore my drawing 20 years ago. The same room where I told her I hated her. She looked at me, a nervous smile on her face. "My name?" "Yeah." "So, with Grandma going away and the house being sold," she paused, waiting for me to fill in the blank, waiting for me to say, "Don't worry, Mom, you're coming with me." I stayed silent. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable, until it was painful. "Well," she continued, her voice trembling slightly, "I was wondering when we are leaving. I need to pack my things, and I hope the new place has a better bed than this couch." I closed my book. I stood up. I walked over to where she sat. I looked down at her. It was time. The air in the living room was stale. It smelled of old dust, unwashed laundry, and the faint, chemical scent of my mother's cheap perfume. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with expectation. She truly believed it. She believed that after everything, after Alicia, after Mark, after Sam, after the beatings, the neglect, the drug dealing, that I was her retirement plan. She thought the title of mother was a blank check she could cash forever. "The new place," she repeated, her voice faltering slightly under my stare. "Does it have a guest room, or am I sharing with you until we get settled?" I took a deep breath. It wasn't a breath of nervousness. It was the breath a sniper takes before pulling the trigger. "There is no we, Mom," I said softly. She blinked. A nervous chuckle escaped her lips. "What do you mean? You can't leave me here. The bank is taking the house next month." "I know. I read the foreclosure notice." "So where am I going?" I stared directly into her eyes. I wanted to see the exact moment her soul broke. "You aren't going anywhere with me," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming cold, hard iron. The silence that followed was deafening. It was heavier than the bookshelf the warden had thrown on me. "You're joking," she whispered. "You're my son. It is your duty." "My duty?" I laughed. It was a dark, jagged sound. "My duty was to survive you, and I did." I took a step closer. The rage I had bottled up for 13 years began to leak out, not as a scream, but as a precise, venomous flow. "Let's talk about duty, Mother. Was it your duty to watch Alicia by the pool, or were you too busy sleeping?" Her face went white. "That was an accident." "Was it your duty to monitor Mark's medication, or were you too high to notice your 15-year-old son was dying in the next room?" "Stop it," she whimpered, shrinking back into the couch with the metal bar. "Was it your duty to lose Sam to the foster system?" I leaned down, my face inches from hers. "You destroyed this family. You are a cancer. You consumed my childhood. You killed my brother and sister, and now you want me to save you?" I stood up straight, towering over her. "I have been saving money since I was 16. I have an inheritance from Grandpa that you didn't know about because he knew you would snort it up your nose if he gave it to you. I have a new job, a new life.
a girlfriend who loves me, and in that life, you do not exist." She started to cry, ugly, heaving sobs. "But I'm your mother. I birthed you. You can't leave me on the street. I have nowhere to go. I'm disabled." "You're not disabled. You're a junkie. And you're a narcissist. You have hands. You have a brain. Figure it out." My grandmother was sitting in her wheelchair in the corner. She was watching. She had tears in her eyes, but she didn't speak. She didn't defend her. For the first time in her life, she let the consequences fall where they belonged. "You get nothing," I said, delivering the final blow. "You will not be at my wedding. You will never see my children. If I have a son, he will never know your name. You will die alone, in the misery you created. And when I get the call that you're dead, I won't come to the funeral. I'll just smile." My mother's jaw hit the floor. The realization finally settled in. The safety net was gone. The bridge was burned. She was falling, and nobody was going to catch her. "Rotten hell, Mom," I whispered. I turned around and walked out of the room. The next 3 months were a blur of logistics and vindication. I moved my grandmother first. I hired a private medical transport to take her to the facility in Florida. It was a beautiful place. Palm trees, sunshine, professional care. She would be safe there. She would be away from the toxic leech that was her daughter. On the day the movers came for my stuff, my mother was sitting on the front porch steps. She looked like a ghost. She had lost weight. Her hair was unwashed. She watched as I loaded the last box into the U-Haul. "Please," she whispered as I walked past her. "Please, my name, don't do this." I didn't even look at her. I walked past her like she was a piece of furniture left out for the trash collector. I got into the truck. Sarah was in the passenger seat holding my hand. "You okay?" she asked. I looked in the rearview mirror. I saw the house where I had been beaten, where I had grieved, where I had plotted. I saw the woman sitting on the steps, head in her hands. "I've never been better," I said. I put the truck in gear and drove away. I didn't look back. I am 31 years old now. It has been 13 years since Mark died. It has been a few years since I left that house. Life is incredible. It's quiet. I married Sarah. We have a dog. We are talking about having kids soon. I have a career I love. I have friends who know me as a happy, well-adjusted man, not the broken boy from the House of Horrors. My grandmother passed away last year. She died peacefully in her sleep in Florida. I was there holding her hand. My mother was not. We didn't tell her where Grandma was, and Grandma didn't want to see her. She finally found peace in her final years. As for my mother, I hear rumors through the grapevine of distant relatives I still talk to. After the bank took the house, she bounced around. She stayed with a friend for a week until they kicked her out for stealing. She stayed in a shelter. The last I heard, she was living in a rundown trailer park 3 towns over with some guy who just got out of prison. She looks 20 years older than she is. She's still in pain. She's still miserable. She tells anyone who will listen that her ungrateful son abandoned her after stealing her inheritance. Nobody believes her. Sometimes, late at night, I think about Mark. I think about Alicia. I wonder what they would be doing now. Mark would be 28. Alicia would be 18. Sam is somewhere out there. I tried to find him, but it's a closed adoption. I hope he's happy. I hope he doesn't remember us. I still have nightmares sometimes. I dream about the pool. I dream about the body bag. But then I wake up. I feel the soft sheets of my bed. I hear my wife breathing beside me. I see the sun coming through the window. And I realize I won. I didn't win by hurting her physically. I didn't win by screaming. I won by living. I won by becoming everything she said I couldn't be. I won by breaking the cycle. My revenge was leaving her behind in the darkness she created while I walked into the light. And let me tell you, the view from here is spectacular. Chapter 18, Final Reflection. For those of you reading this, those of you with brothers and sisters, cherish them, love them, protect them. Being a big brother was the greatest title I ever held. Losing that title broke me, but it also forged me. And for those of you dealing with toxic parents, know this. You do not owe them your life. You do not owe them your happiness. Family is a title that is earned, not given by blood. If they hurt you, if they drain you, if they destroy you, cut them off. Walk away. It is the most painful thing you will ever do, but it is also the most powerful revenge you can ever take. They want your attention. They want your fear. Give them nothing. Thank you for listening to my story. And that is how I walked away from the monster who raced me. It's a heavy story, I know, but sometimes you have to burn the bridge to stop the enemy from following you. If you've ever had to cut off a toxic family member, or if you're struggling with that decision right now, I want you to know you're not alone. You are stronger than they are. If this story hit home for you, please hit that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. And if you want to hear more stories about justice, revenge, and survival, make sure you're subscribed. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe and hold your loved ones close.